Revenge films.
My wife, Wendy, was an absolute anti-waste monster. And even if things were expired already, she would easily try to use them. Whenever I opened up the fridge, it was filled with produce that was already expired because she bought it cheap at the grocery store. Whenever I saw that, I always tried to throw it away. But my wife's habit was to say that it was a waste and refused to throw them out. However, I couldn't get myself to try to use produce that had already changed color or was seeping liquid, so I threw it away. However, whenever I would open up the fridge the next day, I would be faced with the terrifying fact that it was back in the fridge. This was an everyday routine. On that day, when I opened the fridge, I found a pack of what looked to be pork, but with green all over the inside. When I confronted my wife about it, she confessed that it was left in the back of the fridge, and that she forgot about it. I felt sorry for the meat, but it was so disgusting that I immediately took it out of the fridge and threw it in the trash can. I went to work, but that night when I got back home, I sat down and saw that we were having fried noodles for dinner. I took one bite, but then I could taste the rotten smell across my mouth, so I immediately ran to the kitchen sink and threw it all back up. While being overwhelmed with nausea, I looked into the trash can by the kitchen sink, and I could see the pack that I had thrown away that morning, but empty. Wait a minute. Don't tell me that you used that meat. I was turning more and more pale by the minute, to which Wendy replied,
"Oh, how did you know?"
She said that as if it was nothing. Apparently, she thought that she could cover it up with the flavor of the sauce. I couldn't stop throwing up, and I felt so sick in my mouth and my stomach that I rinsed my mouth multiple times. As I was doing that, I got an intense pain in my stomach, and I ran to the toilet. I couldn't get up. In the end, I ended up running into the hospital in the middle of the night. After that, I ended up being placed on a drip for a couple of hours.
Because my mom always said that as long as you get the heat through it, it would be fine. I was taught that if you do that, the heat would kill all the bacteria.
She said. Perhaps because she was raised in a household like that, it seems that my wife had a stronger stomach than me, and she was fine. Wendy was always trying to reduce the amount of raw trash, and she would even cut up the skins and the cores and throw them into the cooking. It was to the point where she would even reuse the fish bones. Out of habit for having this way of thinking, she would often just let things rot in the fridge. Because things would be on sale, she would buy them in large quantities. But she didn't try to do anything to make it last longer, so they wilted away. And when it came to vegetables, they would get mushy as well. Of course, every time that happened, I would get angry. But then Wendy would get even angrier at me in return, and she didn't try to fix it at all. So I was getting tired of it, and that's how she would brush it off. However, if you're going to say that, then my wife was the one who was wasting the sacrificed meat and making it inedible. And for someone like her who would just let expiration dates go on for days without caring, I couldn't listen to anything she said. More than anything, I couldn't keep up with her way of thinking that just because she was fine, I should be fine too. A few days after that, I decided to call my in-laws and tell them the situation that I was in. I told them how I ran to the hospital, and I asked them to please talk to her with me. But then...
That's an easy problem to fix. All you have to do is manage the produce yourself.
And in turn, I was yelled at. And that was the end of it. Even though my mother-in-law had some responsibility in making my wife this way, I was devastated that she wouldn't even try to help me one bit. My wife didn't change anything, and she would let the food rot, but still insist on using it because it was a waste. I was reaching my limit of living with a wife like this. But then one night, my wife invited me to nighttime activities.
I think I want kids soon,
she said, and it sent chills down my spine. My wife and I had spoken before that we wanted to enjoy our newlywed life, and for the first year, we would enjoy our lives together and not try to have children. But now, as long as my wife wasn't going to fix those actions of hers, I thought it would be dangerous to have a child. Since my wife was an anti-waste monster, as soon as she stopped breastfeeding, she would probably give rotten things to the baby, thinking it was fine. And not only that, but behind my back. when I wouldn't be able to stop it? If it's me, I can just still spit it back out, or I can go to the doctor and have a drip put on me, and I would be fine. However, if you feed a newborn baby something like that, there's a chance that the baby's life would be at risk. And when I thought about that, I decided to reject my wife's advantages. Obviously not! Until you do something about that cooking of yours, we're definitely not going to have kids!
That's terrible! How could you tell me not to have kids?
She started crying, but that didn't change the way I thought. However, my wife took this conversation to her parents and complained to them. Of course, my in-laws wanted grandchildren as soon as possible, so they were furious when they found out. They barged into my house, and my father-in-law raised his voice. Hey, you! I heard you told my daughter that you didn't want children. I bet it's just because you don't have any sperm. That's why you said such a thing to my daughter, isn't it? You useless piece of crap! You're not a man! You're not a son-in-law either! You need to get down on your knees and apologize to my daughter! He came in yelling at me, and it pissed me off. But I stayed calm and explained the reason why I didn't want to have children. However, my in-laws refused to even try to hear me out. After he caused a tantrum in front of me and then went home, my wife continued to insist that I was wrong, and I could feel my feelings towards my wife start to freeze away. That's why I said to her, I'm sorry, but I can't be with you anymore like this. I want to divorce. When I said that, with extreme force, she yelled,
In that case, you need to pay a settlement fee. If you're saying we're going to get a divorce just because you want to, then you need to pay $100,000. If not, then I'm not going to sign the papers.
If she was going to say this much, I didn't think there was any point staying with her anymore. But then I remembered that weekend we were going to have a certain gathering with her family. My wife's family had a lot of relatives, and once a month, they would take turns hosting everybody and cooking a meal for a dinner party. And then, I overheard them talking about who was going to be hosting this month. So I asked them to please let us host it. And then, they quickly agreed to it, so I informed my wife. Then perhaps my wife thought that I gave up on the divorce. Or perhaps she wanted to present her proud cooking. But she quickly agreed. I already expected this. But about 4 weeks before the dinner party, she started buying large amounts of produce and meat on sale. And then she left it out. After that, I went to work. And I asked if they had any short-term business trips coming up. And they told me that they had one that week that was going to be 7 days. So I left the house. And then, I made the schedule so that I would be coming home the day before the dinner party, so I could escape from my wife's cooking for that week. That day, my wife spent all morning in the kitchen cooking, and one by one, she lined up the plates. When it became the evening, the relatives slowly piled into our house. And around 7 p.m., we all cheered, and everyone was about to start eating. I thought it would be dangerous to have everybody eat the rotten foods together all at once, so I asked them not to eat just yet. And then, in front of everybody, I told them that I was planning on divorcing my wife, and that this food was the reason. When I told them why, everybody started to smell the food closely. And when they looked at the meat, they all started to scrunch their faces. What is this? This is rotten! If I smell it carefully, it smells terrible! He's right. If you look closely, this meat has changed color to green.
This one too?
People were raising their voices left and right around the table. That was when I revealed to everybody that I tried to confront my wife about using these kinds of products, but that she refused to listen. And that I even went to the hospital and had to get a drip. I told them how when she said she wanted kids, I said no, because there was no way that I could let a child eat this food. But that in turn, her parents turned on me, and that they belittled me, calling me useless and spermless. Then, I can't believe you would make your husband eat this food! Are you trying to kill him? How do you raise somebody that they cook such terrible food? Wait a minute! Do you have a life insurance policy on him?
I can't believe that you would let this child eat this kind of food every day growing up!
Everybody turned to my wife and her parents and started roasting them. My in-laws had shrank so small, and in the end, my wife started crying. As a result, nobody touched the food that my wife made, and the dinner party ended very early. After that, I handed my wife and her parents the divorce papers that I had already signed, and simply said, "We're getting a divorce." Perhaps my wife finally realized after being confronted by everybody, and she started crying and begging that she didn't want to get a divorce. But after everything that she and her parents said to me, I had no intention of starting over. And then, one of the relatives said to her parents, "A divorce is obvious. Now you need to hurry up and sign those papers. I have never, in my life, seen green meat on a plate." After being cornered by everybody, they forced my wife, who was sobbing in a pool of tears, to sign it. After that, this incident caused my wife to be depressed and move back home. And apparently, my parents are being scolded by their relatives daily. However, I was truly relieved. I really am glad that we hadn't tried for children. For a while after that, I was hesitant about marriage. But if I were to be able to meet somebody again, next time, I hope that it's somebody with a more normal take on food.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.